Thanks for letting me read it. Everything in its proper place, eh?
Well, I'd like to be exact. It saves time in the long run.
Tell me, what exactly are you doing about Ann Howard's murder?
Apparently, you didn't read the coroner's report.
No, I did. I read it, yes.
Mode of death.
Undetermined, yes, I know that.
Well, now that we've got that settled, there is something I'd like to talk to you about.
But it's not settled, you see. I mean, all the coroner's report does is say that Ann Howard is dead. That means that the County Bureau of Census knows that the population of Peyton Place is -1. And it's also official so that I can write Ann Howard's obituary. But it's not settled.
I'm investigating her death.
Well, that's just great. I think that's wonderful. After your last fiasco in this town, I'm sure you'll understand if I don't exactly jump with joy because you're investigating Ann Howard's murder.
I'm the only district attorney you have. After all the mudslinging you did in your newspaper, you must have been pretty angry when I was reelected.
Well, I can't help it if the voters have short memories. What I'm concerned with is that your investigation this time turns up the truth.
You'll have to leave that to me.
I see. Well, then perhaps I'd better fill you in on a few facts, Father. From the very first moment that Ann Howard came into Peyton Place, Lee Weber has been threatening her, trying to scare her out of town. He got her fired from her job at the hospital. He even tried to run her down with his motorcycle. Now, I don't care what your coroner's report says, and I don't care what your investigation turns up, but Lee Weber murdered Ann Howard, and that's the truth. What's funny?
You are. Just you, Elliot. All during Rodney Harrington's murder trial, you did everything you could think of to convince me that the Harrington boy was innocent. You were convinced that I was trying to railroad an innocent man. And now you're doing exactly the same thing. You're trying to railroad Lee Weber.
Well, it turned out I was right about that one. I'm also right about this one. Now, look at Fowler. You've been away from town for a while. You don't know what's going on. Also, I think it's very unlikely that your investigation is going to uncover the truth. If Rodney's case was any example of your ability.
There's been an investigation going on from the moment that Ann Howard's body was found at the foot of that bluff. We know that Ann Howard came to Peyton Place to clear herself of the responsibility for Chris Weber's blindness. We know that Lee Weber made threats against Ann Howard. We know that he was drunk and violent the night he went looking for her and that he pounded on her apartment door. We know that Lee Weber would have done anything, including murder, to silence Ann Howard. We know from an eyewitness that approximately 6:40 on the evening of the 16th, Lee Weber almost ran Ann Howard down with his motorcycle.
We have had information on this case from 31 people, and an investigating team is following up other leads right now. Now, if you don't like my investigation methods,
you can always write an editorial. Yes.
Mr. Stephen called to see you, Mr. Fowler.
All right. I do have something I want to talk to you about, but I have an appointment with Stephen. Would you mind waiting for a few minutes?
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Stephen, I'm sorry about Ann.
Thank you for coming, Stephen. Would you sit down? I have a stenographer waiting down the hall to take your official statement, but I wanted to ask you a few things myself, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Try some coffee?
No, thanks.
I have the coroner's report, if you want to see it.
I went to the morgue. I don't need to see the report.
You didn't know that Ann Howard was your sister when you first took her on as a client, did you?
No.
I know that your sister spent some time in a mental institution. But did she ever show any signs of irrational behavior during the time that you knew her?
No.
I'm particularly interested in the day of her death. Was she any different on that day?
That was the day we learned we were sister and brother.
Ann Howard retained you to find out if she was responsible for Chris Weber's blindness, isn't that so?
Yes.
What was the result of your investigation?
Chris Webber finally admitted that Ann didn't push him off the bluff.
Well, that must have been a tremendous relief to your sister. And a terrible shock to Lee Webber. Stephen, isn't it true that Lee Webber threatened and harassed your sister, that he did everything he could to convince her that she was responsible for his brother's blindness, as though he were trying to cover up for his own guilt?
Lee Webber was antagonistic toward Ann, yes.
But when he learned that Chris had cleared your sister, he got drunk, violently drunk. He went looking for her. If he had found her at home, there doesn't seem to be any question but that he would have hurt her.
I know Lee Webber. He has a short temper, I know that. But I also know that half of his violence is hot air.
Then you don't subscribe to the prevailing opinion that Lee Webber was capable of uncontrolled violence. Maybe you don't know that it was his own brother who first tried to warn your sister that Lee was out to get her.
I realize you'd like to add my name to a long list of people who have convinced themselves and you that Lee Webber murdered Ann. But I'm afraid you're going to have to try and hang Lee Webber without my vote.
I don't understand you, Stephen.
What don't you understand?
We're talking about someone that may have been responsible for your sister's death.
You mean you'd understand if I were emotional and irrational?
Oh, no. I'm sure that your sister's death is very upsetting to you, even though you're able to control your feelings. Usually, the relatives of people who have died under questionable circumstances are adamant about one thing, the murderer, if there happens to be one. Oh, I've heard the speech 100 times. If someone was responsible for what happened, promise me you'll find him and punish him. They always say it, even when there's no evidence, no clues, no suspect. But here we seem to have an obvious suspect. Someone you know is a violent type. And yet you're as compassionate as a social worker. You're Ann's brother. It's curious.
If you prefer not to have an official statement from me, I'll understand.
Well, the stenographer is waiting for you down the hall in the interrogation room. Elliot? Thank you for waiting. I've gone over Allison's statement myself, but there are a few things I'd like to ask her about. Could you bring your daughter by here this afternoon?
Okay. Mr. Fowler.
Yes?
Eating more properly?
Yes, sir.
Getting more rest?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it shows you're improving out of that. See you again next month. Is there something else?
The lecture.
Pardon me?
You left out the best part of coming to see you. The lecture.
I'm sorry, I'm a little busy right now.
And sad?
And sad.
I don't know. It's worse when something like Anne happens to someone like you. Terrible things just shouldn't happen to nice people.
Well,
You spend your whole life helping people, healing them, giving them wise lectures, trying to cheer them up, and then you find somebody, something happens. I just want you to know that Norm and I think it's very unfair.
very unfair, and I suppose you and Norman have decided what I should do about this very unfair situation.
Well, we felt that
Rita, I'll take that into consideration.
you'll be all right, Dr. Rossi. I know right now you kind of think you'll never get over it, but you will. And then you'll be all right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said any of that.
Rita. Get out of here, please.
Okay. But I'll be back next month to check up on you.
Hazy, and you were some distance away. But you're sure it was Lee Weber?
Yes.
What makes you so sure?
It was his motorcycle.
And there's no other motorcycle like it?
Not around here, not that I know of.
In other words, your statement should have read, if it was someone that you happen to know from around here, then it was probably Lee Weber. A moment before that, I heard a girl scream. How long is a moment? What makes you sure that the scream had any connection with the sound of the motorcycle, or that the scream came from Sailor's Bluff?
Do you want me to withdraw the statement?
Facts. Provable facts, Miss Mackenzie, are the only thing that can help. Now, let's go over your statement again, and if there are anything specific, any provable fact, please speak up. Now, you were on the beach. You saw a motorcycle go by on the road. Then, in your own words.
Then the motorcycle slowed down.
Did you see the rider?
Yes.
But you weren't close enough to be sure that it was Weber.
I was close enough.
Go on.
And then, he took a bottle from his pocket.
A bottle? What kind of bottle?
I don't know, a whiskey bottle, I guess. Anyway, he took a drink from it.
Or was it a fifth, a pint, a flask? Could you identify it?
No. But he threw it away.
Well, you didn't say so in your statement. There's nothing here about it.
Well, it didn't seem important at the time, but I know pretty well where I was. We should be able to find it if you want to.
You mustn't hold anything back, Allison.
No, I just forgot. When I made the statement, I was thinking about other things about him.
Look at me. You afraid?
Afraid of what?
Of anything?
You mean Lee Weber?
I mean of anything.
Well, I was afraid when I found Anne, and I was afraid when I called my father from Dr. Rossi's house. But I don't think I'm afraid now.
Good. From everything I've heard, Anne Howard was a fine person. We owe her all the courage we have.
I'll do anything I can to help.
Well, let's start by looking for that bottle.
Preview from the continuing story of Peyton Place.
I'll convince him. I'll make him believe me. I'll never lose Steve.
You can't go on covering up for him. You're only hurting yourself.
You know, you have pretty good taste in finks, little brother.
I can't stop thinking about it. And I won't. Not until I force my mother to tell me the truth.